So, stop me if you've heard this narrative before.
The fundamental challenge I think Miami has is this. Tua was hurt in college. He's been hurt in the NFL. That's well documented.
Miami should be good.
Miami
That's a destination.
They should be good.
That's a destination to
They
go
got
to.
Chubb last year too, which
The quarterback can stay healthy. They should be good.
Yep. If Tua can just make it through 15, 16, 17 games and get to the postseason, to where he's available in the postseason.
Tua Tagovailoa is the one that jumps to mind for me. And the issue with Tua is really not all the way in his control, right? It's can he stay healthy? And
Guys, let's talk about Tua because he's trying to rid this view of him as being fragile.
But again, does that translate to him staying healthy? I know he's done some jiu-jitsu to try and help him from falling, be a better guy when it comes to falling. But again, until you get out there and get smacked in the mouth and get hit by guys, you have no idea if any of that will work.
So yeah, I'm sure as you've surmised from those clips, yeah, the talking point for the national media in terms of Miami's expectations is that if Miami wants to go anywhere, Tua has to stay healthy. That is it. No other thing, can happen. Just Tua's health and boom, they're a Super Bowl contending team. Forget the fact that there's other aspects of a football team that determine whether they can make the Super Bowl or make the playoffs and then go to the Super Bowl. So many different things, but nah, it's just the quarterback's health. And the problem that I have is that this is the whole Tua, if he can stay healthy, is such a beaten to death narrative. It's such a lazy talking point because yes, it's low hanging fruit essentially. You can say that about any quarterback. If they stay healthy for the team, the team will make the playoffs and have a shot at the Super Bowl. Especially if you're talking about the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, all of those teams. But the narrative that Tua's health is the determining factor for whether Miami, goes deep into the playoffs. It's a lazy narrative. It's a beaten to death narrative, and it really needs to stop. It really needs to stop. Like I mentioned before, you can apply that if this quarterback stays healthy narrative to any other team. Any team. If Jalen Hurts misses any time in Philly would be hard pressed to make the playoffs. That's applicable to, a whole lot of teams. So like one of the rare teams that you probably couldn't apply that to is Tennessee because they rely on Derrick Henry. That sports media, instead of raising like legitimate criticisms of Tua, like here, I'll give you a couple. He's a timing quarterback. You mess up his timing, you mess up the offense. He also struggles throwing to the outside. If you force him to throw more balls to the outside, they're not as effective. Two criticisms right there that I provided that you can expound upon as, media members who have covered way more football than, me, a regular YouTuber, has. Like, those are two criticisms. You could even say, I'll even give you a third. He doesn't, he has a mixed bag against good teams. He may have a game against, like the game he had with against the Ravens, where he threw for almost 500 yards and threw for 6 touchdowns. But then he also has a game against Tennessee the year prior to this year where Miami needed to win, and he just struggled to do whatever. Like, he struggled. That was probably his worst game of the season at the point where they needed him to play at his best. You could have even had that to say. But, like, those are 3 talking points that I've given you, me, a random YouTuber, that you could talk about. But instead, you guys choose to focus on the low-hanging fruit of, if he stays healthy. If he doesn't suffer concussions. It's like, by the way, those concussions are a freak occurrence. The odds of a player suffering multiple concussions like that is very rare. I don't think it'll happen again this year. The problem is not the fact that they, say it. It's like, sure, it is a legitimate criticism or a legitimate talking point. But my problem is it shouldn't be the only talking point. When you talk Miami, when you're talking about Miami and the offense in particular, you should talk about how, their offense is based on timing and it can be disrupted if you bump the receivers, if you get physical with them. That Tua struggles to throw outside the numbers. Talk about those things instead of just saying, he couldn't stay healthy, that's why they struggled. He couldn't, he suffered those concussion. Wow, English is hard. He suffered those concussions, he couldn't stay healthy. So it's like there are other things. like he needs to do. Tua needs to do. He needs to shore up those weaknesses if Miami needs to get to where they need to get to. Talk about those things instead of just saying, "Oh, he needs to stay healthy." He will fall short of expectations only because of him getting injured. It's just lazy. It's just y'all could do better. And it's not just ESPN. Like, you know, like you saw, Pat McAfee, the people on Pat McAfee even did it. And it's like, I feel like they provide pretty good, you know, views on the world of football. And even they were just saying, yeah, if Tua stays healthy. I mean, you heard Pac-Man Jones. Yeah, if Tua stays healthy. It's like, come on, man. like, yeah, there are other things besides, you know, him staying healthy that, you know, he needs to legitimately work on. And if he works on them and if he improves on them, then yeah, we have a far better chance of doing well in the playoffs than we did last year. And like I mentioned before, there are other things that go into how well a football team does at the season. Like Philadelphia, I'll use Philly as an example. Did Jalen Hurts improve to an MVP level? Yes, of course he did. But guess what? They also had one of the best defenses in the league. They had probably one of the best, if not the best, offensive line. Like Lane Johnson still, like, it's been almost 1,000 days. He hasn't allowed a sack to a quarterback. I want protection the way Lane Johnson provides protection to Jalen Hurts. That's the type of protection I want. Like, screw the Secret Service. I want that level of protection. But like, Philly had everything clicking for them, and because of that, they were able to make the Super Bowl. And if, you know, Bradbury doesn't hold what's his face, Juju, who's to say Philly doesn't win that game? But the point being is that there's more than just the quarterback having a good year to for a team to meet their expectations. Talk about the defensive improvements, but they don't mention how, on paper at least, improve so much to the point where, you know, Tua and the offense don't need to score 30 a night just to ensure that we have a good chance of winning. Because last year, our defense was horrible. And really, it was horrible because Josh Boyer is not a very good defensive coordinator, for one. And two, because we had a lot of injuries. Like, our secondary was decimated to the point where it was pretty much Javon Holland and Kader Kohu and a bunch of players that probably wouldn't be on a team if we didn't have those injuries. A bunch of practice squad players. And I'll even say Kader was probably our second best defensive back besides Javon, because X was injured and he stayed injured, and, you know, he wasn't the same as he's been in previous years. And it's like, our defense, on paper at least, has improved so much to where we legitimately have a chance to have a top 10 defense. I believe we're that good. I believe we can have a top 10 defense. And having a top 10 defense will ensure that Tua doesn't have to score 30 a night or 30 a game just to ensure that we have a decent chance of winning. It takes pressure off the offense. They can play more ball control, you know. Oh, which is, again, another criticism that I have of the Dolphins offense is that we didn't run the ball nearly enough. And McDaniel recognized that, which is why he got A-Chain, which is why, you know, we're in talks to get Dalvin Cook. Like, you know, he knows that we need to run the ball more. We need more balance. It's like, but back to the defense, it's like, even if Tua misses time, which, again, the low-hanging fruit, if he misses time, blah, 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 at least the defense can hold the fort down, unlike last year, where, like, you know, they were giving up 25 plus, and they got a little better at the end. But again, they were playing not so great teams in the Patriots and Jets. Oh, the other thing that they don't really talk about is that McDaniel also understands Tua's strengths and weaknesses better now. Like, this is the first time that Tua's been in an offensive system for more than a year. Like, he understands what McDaniel wants from him. McDaniel understands what Tua can do. So now they should have a better year because of that understanding. Like, you have more of a chemistry. And I do think McDaniel will not spam so many pass patterns down the middle like he did last year. Which, again, if the national media did their job, they would talk more about how Miami, you know, tried to do things through the middle and it caught up to them and defenses started picking up on it. And it's like the San Francisco and LA Chargers games were perfect examples of how defenses like, oh, they like throwing down the middle. all right, cool. We'll take away the middle, force Tua to throw the ball outside, disrupt their timing, get physical with their receivers, and let's see where the chip falls. Now it is risky because if you miss on the press against Tyreek or Jalen Waddle, that's 6 points. You might as well just get on the kickoff line because you're not catching them, because they'll blow right past you and Tua will put it on the numbers for both of them. It's risky, but it was very, very effective because it did do the one thing that defenders wanted, that the defense wanted, to disrupt their timing, and that's what happened. And I think McDaniel, from what I've seen in training camp, they've been working on a lot of outside the number throws, a lot of deep shots that don't require going down the middle, and and I've been begging for this, a lot of shorter throws. Like, you don't have to have the 15-20 yard down the field throws on every pass pattern or every pass play. You can dump the ball off to the running back, which again is probably why they got A-Chain, because he can take a 5-yard pass and take it 80 yards to the house. So it's like there were other things that Miami could have done to not put Tua in so much danger, health-wise. And a criticism that I had of McDaniel is that he kept spamming those intermediate to deep pass plays that put Tua in danger, because those are usually 5-7 step drops that take him a little bit out of pocket and allow defenders to get to him, which is what happened in that Cincinnati game. So it's like there are other things that you can criticize Miami for, you can criticize Tua for, but they go back to that same talking point. Oh, if he stays healthy, it's the concussions. It's like, by the way, Tua wasn't the only one that suffered concussions. I think T. Higgins had multiple concussions throughout that year, and it is barely talked about. Like, that is someone that plays a position that's takes more of a pounding than quarterback, yes, but he still suffered multiple concussions, and he's a major player on one of the better teams, and you don't hear a peep about that. But when it comes to Tua, because it was on national TV, because the whole nation saw Tua throw up gang signs to God because of that horrible concussion, it's like, oh, can he stay healthy? Tua's health. It's like, yes, he suffered a horrible concussion, but again, that's a freak occurrence. Up to that point, I don't think Tua ever suffered a concussion to that extent that I know of. And I don't think he ever recovered from that concussion. I will agree. I don't think, I think that level of concussion, you probably needed to sit a month or two. It's like, yes, he got injured. Yes, he suffered concussions. And yes, he hasn't exactly been the healthiest over these past years. But again, that's not the only criticism that you should be leveling at Tua. Like, if you're going to criticize him, or if you're going to say things about him, then just have other talking points other than, oh, he needs to stay healthy. That's the thing. And again, and I mentioned this before, he's not had the greatest track record against good teams. He's had good games against the Ravens. He's had bad games against Tennessee. He's had bad games against San Francisco, LA last year. So it's a mixed bag, and he needs to do better. I think all of Dolphins Nation, believes that if Tua plays well against the good teams, we'll go far, and he needs to do that. That needs to be a thing. We can't have any more of the mixed bag. We need him to play better against the good teams, period. If Tua brushes up on his issues, which is throwing outside the numbers, which is not relying so much on timing, which again he's great at, but there are times where he just needs to play off script, and that's something that he does struggle with. Like, if it's not scripted, if the receivers are not where they need to be at that particular point, it's going to look pretty bad. Do not be surprised if there are times in the season where Tua just throws some goofy interceptions because him and the receiver either weren't on the same page or the receiver wasn't where they needed to be. Heck, there was a training camp throw earlier this week where Tua threw a ball literally to Noah Igbenogany, who's our worst cornerback. And when people looked at the route, it's like, oh yeah, that was a horrible throw. It was horrible because I think it was Noah that bumped Tyreek, threw off the entire timing of that route, and Tua already made up his mind to throw it. Stuff like that can't happen. he needs to pull that ball back and, you know, maybe extend the play a little bit. And that's not a strength of his, and that's something that he needs to work on, which I'm assuming they have been working on. But again, those are legitimate criticisms that they can make, that the national media can make, but they don't want to. It's the entertainment factor. It's like, oh yeah, those concussions, he needs to stay healthy, blah, blah, blah. I do believe, you know, he was making those adjustments in the Buffalo and Green Bay games. I do think from a growth perspective, those two games are two of his better games. Up until he suffered the concussion in the Green Bay game. I think those games were, he was starting to throw outside the numbers. He was starting to, you know, he was starting to not exactly throw a ball that much down the middle, you know. So, and that, you know, if they continue to work on that, if they continue to vary those type of route patterns, you know, put a lot of stress on the defense, you know, instead of just focusing on one part of the field, like the middle, the offense will be very dangerous until it will take that next step. But he has to work on that continuously, because that's not a strength of his. His strength is his anticipation, his accuracy. But there are times where he's going to have to go off script. And can he still make plays when he goes off script? That is one of the main questions that should be asked. And that should, you know, those types of criticisms should be leveled at him. That's what should be talked about, instead of the whole, oh, he can't stay healthy, oh, the concussions. So I'm just gonna end this video, and again, I know it probably sounds like a broken record at this point. Like, the expectations for Tua should be strictly on what he does on the field. You can't predict injuries. It can happen to anyone at any time. And again, like I said before, him missing time, is that problematic for Miami? Of course, sure. But it's not the be-all, end-all of predicting Miami's chances. Like, there are a lot of things that go into being a good or bad football team. If Tua has an MVP year, but the defense is garbage again, we're probably not going to go very far in the playoffs, you know. Or if Tua sucks and the defense is like championship caliber, again, same thing. We're probably not going to go very far in the playoffs. So, like, everything has to work together in order for us to, you know, when I say us, I mean Miami, in order for Miami to make it to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. The defense has to be better than it was last year. Tua has to take that next step. We have to have more balance in the running game. Like, we have to run the ball more. We can't be Buffalo, where they refuse to run the ball even though they had decent running backs in Singletary and Cook. Like, there are a lot of things Miami has to do to not put all of the pressure on Tua throwing the ball to score 30 points a game. And, you know, if those things happen, then we'll get to where we need to get to. But this whole notion that, oh yeah, Miami's fate will rely strictly on Tua's health is, you know, it's a washed narrative. It's a stupid narrative, and it's a narrative that needs to stop. So that's all I'm gonna say on the topic. I'm sure I can't wait for the season to start, as, you know, all of Dolphin Nation. If Tua's able to play a full season, yes. If he's able to improve upon what he did last year, I feel like he'll have an MVP season, and I feel like the Dolphins have a good chance of winning a Super Bowl. I truly believe that, and I'm sure a lot of Dolphins fans feel the same way. So I just hope that, you know, the national media gets past this talking point, and I hope that Tua's not the only quarterback where his health is held against them, you know, because again, quarterback health, you know, whether a quarterback misses time or not, that's something that can apply to all teams. Like, those concussions that happened to him could have happened to Burrow, could have happened to Mahomes. It's unfortunate that it happened to him on national TV, but, you know, if everything works out well, if we have the type of year that Philly had in terms of everything coming together, the defense, offense, special teams, all of that, if everything comes together, I think we'll be where Philly was, and hopefully we can finish the job, unlike Philly. But again, it remains to be seen, and I hope, you know, Miami on offense works out the issues that plagued them last year.
No question about it, I am ready to get hurt again.